Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started. And we're going to use our foam roller to just kind of communicate to our nervous system a little bit. We're going to set it behind you above your low back. So we don't want to be in the lumbar curve. We're just going to be kind of at the lowest ribs or just below where your bra strap is. And then you can hold your head with the back of your, or with your hands rather. And then you could do one of two things here. You could just do a little kind of a back bend over it, or you could roll. So you're either using it as a stationary object to curl over on, dropping your head back maybe if it feels okay in your neck, or you can push into your feet, lift your hips, and rock front to back on your back. Hi, Laura. Hi, Jenny. So just take a little bit of time to feel that sensation in the backside. It might be nice to mix it up in terms of stillness versus movement. Depending on the surface of your foam roller, one might feel better than the other. We'll take about 15 to 30 more seconds wiggling around on this roller. Sometimes I actually like to do this little scrubbing technique, like kind of like a cat scratching its back against an object. All right, so we're gonna change to a breathing technique, and it's nothing fancy. And this is where you're gonna need your blanket. There's gonna be a little bit of adjustment for you. You're gonna lay on your tummy, and the blanket is going to just give you some feedback. So you're actually gonna lay it over your low back or the lowest part of your ribs. And then the idea here is just gonna make your head and neck comfortable, and you're gonna try to breathe into the weight of that blanket on your low back or on your low ribs. So we're trying to get a sense of that posterior expansion. Feet can be a little wider. You could come onto the tops of your feet, or you could tuck your toes if you want a little toe stretch. And then let's start to breathe a little slower. If you're a counter, you could try 4 to 6 counts in and trying to match that at least, or maybe even make the exhales a little bit longer. And if you are drawn to that wave-like sound of your breathing, you're going to create just a soft restriction in the back of your throat so that you can hear that subtle whisper, almost like a sigh when you exhale. During this class, I try not to talk too much. So there's going to be times where you'll hear nothing from me, and you'll have the music or your own silence to reflect on. And remember, in this class, you don't always have to be perfectly still. There's more than one way to approach these things. But if stillness is what you're craving tonight, then I encourage you to really drop in. But when your body gives you a sign that something needs to change, please honor that. Feel the weight of your pelvis. No effort there, no work in the legs. Observe any small pauses that you're experiencing when you breathe. After the exhale, perhaps. Just a moment of being clear and empty, almost like a little reset button. Okay, we're going to move on to our next shape. It's going to be our half frog pose, and we'll do a little extra for the hips and the shoulders while we're there as well. So you can remove your blanket, and you might want it off to the left side of your mats, especially if you're on a hard floor like I am. If you're on carpet, it shouldn't be a big deal. Scoot yourself a little bit towards the right edge of your mat. And then your left leg is going to come into that half frog pose shape. Knee out from the hip at about 90 degrees. And then the long end of your mat and the lower leg bone are parallel. And just like you did with that crocodile breathing, you're going to try to arrange your head and your neck in a position that feels satisfying and comfortable, whether that's to turn it to one side or not. And then just notice now that your pelvis is probably a little bit unbalanced. I'm guessing that you're feeling more weight on the right side, and maybe the left front pelvis is lifted away from the floor, and that's totally fine. Just let it be. We're going to take a couple different phases through this pose. So I'll set my handy timer. And for now, just relax with this left leg in a little half frog. Okay, so our next little add-on for this, I'm not gonna change the legs at all, but I'm gonna give you two choices with the upper body. First one would be to come into Sphinx pose. So a little bit more of a back bend. This might be a lot for your low back. So if you're doing this one, you do want to add in a little bit of a tuck under with your pelvis, almost like you're trying to lift your pelvis away from the floor and slide your tailbone between your legs. The other choice would be to stay low and reach your arms behind you and kind of hold your wrists or your forearm so your shoulders are an extension. And you can even hold your own hand here. That's kind of nice. And then your elbows towards the floor. And perhaps then you can feel your shoulder blades widen across your back. Drop back into relative stillness and connect to breath sensation. Okay, so we're going to let go of the arm position for just a moment so we can sort out this left leg. We're going to work on a little mobilization. It's going to be super chill. And your arms can just be arranged however you like. I'm probably going to keep mine out front here. And we'll turn our left leg inward. And as you rotate your left thigh inward, your lower leg is going to pivot away from the earth. And it's almost like you're trying to shine the sole of your foot towards the ceiling. Now, it's tempting to try to make this movement really big. And when you do that, your whole pelvis might rotate, and that's not really what we want. So we're just going to try to keep the pelvis stable. You might even take your hand back there for a moment to make sure it's not lifting and lowering. And we're only going to take that left leg as far into internal rotation as we can while we keep the pelvis in its neutral position. And then I'll let you decide, do you want to lift and hold into that internal rotation, or do you want to kind of move in and out? A little bit of a pause between your repetitions. And we'll only have about 1 minute here, so just find your edge. No need to push, simply allowing, observing, connecting. This is an experience where you can remind yourself that more almost always doesn't necessarily translate to better. I can't think of a single benefit of pushing your body too far, too soon. It almost always has the opposite effect of what we desire. Okay, that's our minute for hip internal rotation. And then we're going to roll onto our back. We're going to stay on this left leg for our next movement. So once you get onto your back, you could support yourself underneath your head with your blanket or a pillow. Start with your knees bent and your feet on the ground. And then your left leg is going to cross over the right into our figure 4. And then as always, I have some choices for you. This might be nice just to be here. You could add in gentle resistance, leg trying to spin back in towards the body and your arm is gently guiding it back open. You could add in that little threading the needle option as you draw your right leg up. You can capture the back of your right thigh, or you can use the core and this right hip flexor to make that change without using the support of your arms. Or you can make these nice little soothing sacral rocks, which is my preference. Any combination of those choices. So if you decide that you've had enough of one, feel free to move on to the other. Play around with the speed if you're rocking. If you go super slow, you might be able to really fine-tune each little spot as it connects to the earth. Communicate with yourself in that way. Not judging it, just noticing it, feeling it, being the witness. Uncross your left leg and send your feet as wide as your mat, or maybe even a little wider than your mat with your knees bent. Let your knees tap in towards each other. And then your arms are just going to drape across your torso. It doesn't really matter which arm is on top. And your arms can be fairly tight across your body. You could almost think of this like giving yourself a hug, or they could just dangle and be super chill and passive. Relax your hands and your fingers. Notice the space between your fingers. Softening away any unnecessary holding or gripping around your jaw, or your neck, or your shoulders, and just be. Okay, let's move on to that second side. We'll do that same sequence, starting on the front. In that frog pose, or half frog pose rather. Shimmy yourself over towards the left. Left leg's going to be straight. Right leg is out at 90 degrees. Knee bent at 90 degrees or on the inside of your right leg. And then we'll just start with that little passive relaxation. Feeling the pelvis drop down towards your mat. Arranging your head and arms in a good spot. Turning your head one direction or the other. Letting go of any holding around your right hip. What would it feel like if you could actually breathe into your right hip? Okay, let's set up our next version. So we're going to go for either Sphinx pose, a little bit of an upper back bend, a little more work, maybe a little more stretch on the front side, or you're going to take the shoulder extension with that little wrapped up hold behind your back, and then the elbows can just kind of relax towards the earth. Now you can rearrange your arms in whatever position feels good while we spend 1 minute working on this right hip for internal thigh rotation. imagining that you could roll the top side of your thigh inward towards the floor. As a result, that lower leg is going to pivot off the ground. You can do repetitions or just one long holding stretch. And this is a hip opener, believe it or not. I think there's this misconception that the legs have to be moving away from each other in order to classify a position or a pose as a hip opener. But since our hip is a ball and socket joint, it opens on the inside too. Or I should say it opens on the outside. Tracing the edges of that stretch just for a few more breaths. And then we're going to move on to the supine figure 4. Rolling onto our backside. We're going to stay with this right leg. Right ankle over left. Tucking shoulders down just a little bit, making some space in your neck. And then those choices again are just to remain, to thread the needle actively without the arms or supported with the arms behind your leg. And then there's also that option of the somatic rocks. Nice and slow, feeling around that sacral area. Let's reset our feet mat width. Knees travel together, a little bit of inward hip rotation again. And then we'll add in that little lazy crisscross of the arms over our body. Noticing the natural curvature of your spine in this position. Notice if there's any tipping up the pelvis or what feels kind of like a neutral position of comfort baseline. No desire to change anything about that. Notice rise and fall of belly. Okay, moving on, my friends. You can release the crossing of your arms. We'll take legs just up over the hips. Right leg's going to pull in slightly. Left leg's going to move away slightly. And then we're going to try to squeeze and cross our legs. So right leg on top, left leg tucking behind. And then draw your legs closer to you like you did with that figure 4. See if you can get a hold of opposite shin, ankle, or foot. Maybe even the knees, depending on your structure. And it almost feels like how you would cross shoelaces and then kind of tighten them in that first tie. So your right arm, your right hand is kind of pulling that left shin across and vice versa. And you can also compress your thighs towards your body just a little bit more. And then just feel for sensation around your outer hips. You might also be feeling stuff on your inner thighs as well. Notice if the points of contact on your backside changed compared to our previous position with the feet grounded and the knees together. Likely so. Okay, we're going to uncross the legs, give our hands a little break. Just let your arms rest beside you with your palms facing open, fingers at ease. Nice full-bodied breath. Slow and maybe even a little bit subtle. Unrushed, unforced. Okay, we have the other side to go. Loft up the legs, and then you're gonna switch. Left leg's gonna squeeze on top. Right leg snuggles behind. kind of matching up the knees, but it's not going to be symmetrical. And the sensation is also likely to be varied compared to that last side. Give a gentle tug and a gentle hug, as if you were trying to draw your feet away from each other as the legs squeeze. You can let that go. And for just a few moments, let your body sort out what it might need right now. So if you're feeling a little bit of congestion in the front of the hip, lifting your hips in a bridge pose might feel pretty good. The windshield wipers could be nice, adding in that little bit of rotation. As you let your thighs rotate in those wipers, go ahead and let your pelvis twist a little bit too. Arms can come out to cactus, sensing an opening on the front of the shoulder and chest. And then we're going to move on to a version of sleeping butterfly. So I'm going to offer you a few choices. What I thought might be nice as a final touch, once we all get settled, is to have that blanket again. And just like we did in that first breathing practice, you'll eventually take that blanket and lay it over your pelvis or belly as kind of a grounding effect. But for your butterfly, what you could do if you have the tools for this is to also make it a back bend, make it a little fish pose. So that could look like yoga blocks set up into the T. First block on the higher side, second block on the lowest side. A bolster, this isn't quite big enough, but if you had a bolster or another rolled up yoga mat, you could recline back on that and make a little ramp for yourself. Or you could even do 2 blocks like so, and then have that be your little support for your fish pose, kind of where your shoulder blades would be. And then you could create that little back bend. Or if your foam roller isn't too big for this, you could also lay back on your foam roller. And then the soles of the feet meet, the legs open. If you had something you wanted to shim your legs with, you could put some supports on your outer thighs, just so that you don't feel too exposed in the hip joints. So we're going to be in this one for just a little bit longer. So I'm going to go ahead and set my timer again. Take all the time you need to get this just right for yourself, so you can be super comfy in it. in this position, it might be easier for you to feel that front body expansion, the low belly or the bowl of the pelvis rising and falling with breath. If you are ultra comfortable and you have no desire to change your position for our final pose of rest, it's okay to stay. But if you feel like there needs to be a shift, a change, a reorganization of your body, then do that now. Maybe you have something you can cover your eyes with if there's light in your space. And perhaps you'd like to put your sweatshirt on or cover your body so that you're warm. Let your mouth open. Stick your tongue out. And then let it lay back in your mouth as you put a light touch seal on your lips. Move air through your nose. Smooth out the space right between your eyebrows. In fact, let your whole skin, that container, fall into ease and effortlessness. Let your breath come naturally without trying to direct it in any way. Just let it be. Rest your eyes. Acknowledge any thoughts that you have that remain unattached. Let them drift off. You can think of your thoughts like bubbles, and you just give them a signal, a nod, and then they can be carried off. Body rest. We're going to keep our body as is for just a few more moments. No need to rush into anything. Sometimes we rush into making changes before we really know where we are, our starting point. This is something I've shared before. So just observe for now. Feel any physical sensations. Notice the energy body, which is your breath. Acknowledge any emotions or thoughts that you have percolating inside your system. And just remember that all of that doesn't define you. Because it's probably true that those sensations and those feelings and those thoughts have changed just in this last hour, or at least been subdued in some way, or perhaps heightened in some way. As you start to remobilize your body or take a few conscious breath cycles, I'd like to share something. I got to thinking today about changes that we make or resolutions that we make this time of year. It got me to thinking about action versus hope or wishes, and resolutions versus intentions, things like that. So I found this short paragraph that I was really drawn to, and I thought it would be interesting to share this as we close our practice tonight. Change requires neither saintliness nor genius. What it does require is the conviction of the incomparable value of life. Nothing should matter more to us than the attempt to grasp our life while we have it, and to awaken from the slumber of routine, so that we may die only once. Hope is not the condition or cause of action. Hope is the consequence of action. And those who fail in hope should act practically or conceptually so that they might hope. This little bit here. Hope is the consequence of action. When we take action, we can create our own hope and optimism. Action comes first. And you can move the way you want to move. Maybe you want to lay on your side for a little bit. Or you could create a little cannonball shape and rock and roll your way up to your seat. That final sit is one last opportunity to observe the state of things before you head back into your day or your evening. Maybe with a fresh set of eyes and some subtle shifts in the body. And hopefully just a few more spaces or pauses in your thoughts. Thank you so much for being here. It's always my pleasure and honor to guide you. For those of you in Zoom, I'll hang around for a moment or two to chat. Namaste.